first of all, our baby boomers, who are still a substantial force in our workplace, they are the only generation recognized by the US Census. So, of course, named for that population growth after World War II. And our baby boomers are known for so many things: social change, civil rights, women's rights. I want to talk specifically, because we're focusing on the workplace a little bit, the idea that our baby boomers had this opportunity, but also this expectation to create things for themselves and their families that their parents and grandparents did not have the opportunity to create. And there's a lot of things we could put under that umbrella. But for example, in terms of workplace and wealth, these were the children of people who had just gone through depression and war, and they were suddenly in a relatively peaceful space. There were obviously still wars and conflicts, but relatively contrast to World War II and the Depression. They took advantage of those opportunities, and we saw our baby boomer generation have an extremely strong work ethic about building success and in driving change. And this looks different for every person, of course, in that generation, but our baby boomers were the generation that coined the word workaholic. So success for baby boomers often meant number of hours worked, title, position in the hierarchy, status, promotions, really almost a pressure, but also a drive to create a better future. And we could apply that to civil rights and women's rights and all of those things as well. So the baby boomers working very hard to bring opportunity for themselves and their families. The oldest baby boomers gave birth to my generation, Generation X. I would like any Gen Xers on the call to shout out in the chat. And the reason I say that is Gen X is the smallest generation we have, often ignored. But right now, I find in my talks that Gen X is having a real moment, because there's a good amount of us in sort of prime years of our careers. Here for the Gen Xers, I champion all generations. I give a special shout to Gen X as my own unsung generation. But Gen X started when the population, there you go, thank you. The population fell for the first time since World War II. So that was our auspicious start. When the population dropped, we began. X was just meant to be a placeholder name, but it stuck, sort of an in-between, mysterious mark that no one quite knows what it means. And Gen Xers, the thing I love to say, you can say lots of things about every generation, but the thing that I love to talk about is how we were the last generation of children to be seen and not heard. So the world was still perceived as relatively safe. We were given a lot of independence because of those hardworking parents that were working all those hours. There was no daycare yet, really, not widespread chain or workplace daycare for most of us. So we were the latchkey kids, right? And just to give you a sense, my students today have no idea what that means. So you always have to check yourself about your generational lens. But it was a time when we had lots of independence, and success for our generation meant autonomy, maybe more so even than other generations. So when it came to choosing our careers and deciding what work was going to mean, a higher percentage, this is the way I like to talk about it, a higher frequency of Gen Xers pushed for work-life balance than what we saw in the baby boomers. Not all of us, but more of us, that we didn't want to work 70 to 80 hours a week. What about our free time? What about balance? What about, those kinds of meaningful work? And you can imagine how that was perceived by a generation of parents and grandparents who had been dedicating themselves to hard work and career. We earned from that the nickname the slacker generation. And it's all relative, right? So you don't want to work that many hours, you want balance. That's perceived as being a slacker. Well, now we're going to move to the most discussed generation ever of our millennials. This generation, I get a question a lot. Why are the millennials not defined by the year 2000? Otherwise, why are we calling them the millennials? Which is a great question. The answer is that this is the generation that would, quote, come of age during the new millennium. That is where that name comes from. And it was ended in 96 because we wanted everyone in the millennial generation to have a live memory of 9/11. So the idea was you had to be at least 5 to have a memory of that event. And so that was how we cut that generation. So it's a little bit of an art, it's a little bit of a science, but our millennial generation is known for all of those things, like being the first digital natives. We can say tons of things about them, but the highlight I want to give for you today is, unlike the Gen Xers, who were children should be seen and not heard, left to our own devices, the millennials were the first generation where children were largely moved to the center of the family. Their needs, their schedules, those things, just as a social movement, became very central to the family. And if you look at it from a background, the boomers, the youngest boomers who had been sort of at this working hard, nose to the grindstone, were working hard to create opportunities, and the millennials were largely the recipients of those opportunities. So there was this movement to think what would be possible, and I think all of you in your areas of expertise will understand this, what would be possible for our children if we gave them opportunities and development early that were not given to children prior to that, at that level.